Hey everyone, my name is Willy Sennott. I'm from Vega Cloud. I'm the EVP of FinOps here. We are an enterprise FinOps platform in the cloud. The more complex your needs are, the more that sits inside of our sweet spot. And I'm super excited today to join this little conversation with Bill Britton. He was a longtime CIO at Cal Poly, and I'm going to toss it over to him to do a quick intro.
Thank you very much, Willie. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk about FinOps technology, advanced technology, and how it all kind of fits together. I've got over 40 years experience in technology, both in the Department of Defense, then as a Beltway bandit defense contractor, all the way up to a general manager position in that world and field, and then working at the university as a CIO. I've been mixed in with technology and the challenge between financing technology, paying for technology, showing how you paid for it and what it did for a company for the last 40 years. It's a very interesting mix, and it's a great topic for FinOps.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm really excited today to kind of focus in a little bit on what does it mean for FinOps for the executive. So a little bit different lens than oftentimes we see talks and podcasts on that are really focused on the nitty gritty of a practitioner and day-to-day experiences and the sort of the tactical elements that are incredibly important for a successful FinOps practice. But just to step back several levels and think more from a higher level strategy standpoint and say, how does the conversation change inside of an organization or a large enterprise the higher you move up the responsibility chain? So ultimately into the C-suite. What do those things look like? What's important to them? What matters? Because it does, it changes, and it's always, sometimes I think as a FinOps practitioner, it's a bit of a challenge because you are navigating through a whole bunch of different personas inside of your organization at different responsibility levels, and being able to have the same conversation using different words and concerns because your constituency is different who you're meeting with at a point in time, right? So I think that's a challenge for FinOps practitioners, because one of the cool things about FinOps, I think, is that as an individual, you can get exposed to conversations inside of an organization that you may never have thought you were going to get exposed to, depending on what your level is, right? Because it is just so important in getting more and more visibility inside of an organization, which makes it incredibly exciting.
Absolutely. I think, Willie, one of the things that no matter what level you're at, cost matters, right? The finances of how to pay for things is really an important conversation. With technology changing as fast and rapidly as it is, we're merging AI. We're doing all of these technology. The buzzword for a while was modernization. And with all of those, what we did is we had kind of two schools of thoughts. One was, let's modernize. So buy a bunch of technology. It'll replace people. It'll do things. It'll make us go faster, do better things. But in all of that, what was kind of missing was that connectivity between the decision process and the outcome, and how do you equate those things? The move to the cloud is a really good example of that. Is that a lot of people for the longest time didn't even know what the cloud was. They knew it was something that was new and modern, and maybe we should go to it. And so again, we did, and it became more of a technical decision on why, not a financial decision. So again, the key becomes in that world of strategy is not only what do I do to reduce cost and operations, but also what is the impact of doing so? And so, in the world of compute, it's all about data, right? And so data and financial data is really critical. And so are the moves I'm making, is the modernization we're doing, is it having impact? Is it really creating effective use of how we spend money, how we employ personnel, how we do things? And so again, I think without that common understanding, you're just hoping that the changes you made in technology work.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think, I love the concept of, cost always matters. I had a very engaging conversation with a CIO that I used to work with when we were first sort of spinning up this type of practice back in 2013, 14. And the conversation sometimes was, hey, people don't care about costs. And my answer was, yeah, until they do. And when they do, it's too late. right? It becomes a fire drill. And look, I love my friends in the C-suite, but they have a tendency sometimes to react to things very quickly on a moment's notice, and we have to pivot and do all this stuff. And so I think one of the challenges for a good FinOps organization inside of an enterprise is to keep the C-suite and higher level executives informed and engaged along the way, so you can avoid some of those, hey, we're going to do these massive changes and shifts today, because they don't have the information.
It's also the estimating process. So when I worked in the profit and loss world, estimating or forecasting was critical. And if you were far off your forecasting, you were looking for a new job. It has to be the same kind of world in the CIO realm. But everybody goes, well, I don't know how to forecast technology. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know what AI is going to do to me. But however come, what you can forecast is the cost and effectiveness of the decisions you are making, but just prior to making them, and then evaluating them as you go. So the disconnect I see in IT today is that a lot of those decisions are made, then they come back 6 months, 8 months, a year later to evaluate. Too late, not soon enough. And oh, by the way, the technology changed in that 6-month window. So now already you've got new decision points you've got to add to it. And there's really no good way other than the optimization of FinOps into your process to really keep up on those evaluating costs and changes with technology as it merges.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think sometimes technology changes within a 6-hour window, let alone a 6-month window.
Well, again, cloud really changed the game. I mean, it really can change within the course of that time frame, 6 hours, an hour. And the thing I find interesting is I don't care where you're working, right? I don't care what field it is. I would guarantee that you are now generating 10 times to 100 times more data than you were a year ago.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And for those of us that have a love affair with data, it's exciting times. And I think you were correct, right? So I think from sitting in a chair of the C-suite or an executive, right, is to say, hey, one of the things that I actually want to know is how well are my teams leveraging the cloud the way that it is meant to be leveraged. I used to say things when I first started and we'd engage with a new customer, and I would look at their consumption right out of the gate, and you could see a bunch of steady state EC2 instances. And right away, my comment was, I know you think you're in the cloud, but you're really just in somebody else's data center because you haven't embraced what the power of the cloud is. And I think so. One of the challenges that I've been asked before by CIOs, CTOs, executives is, how can I understand how well my teams are embracing the complexity of the technology? How can I tell they're moving up the cloud maturity scale, if you want to think about it that way, inside of teams, especially in a large enterprise that conceptually could have been built through acquisition? So you get all these different levels of skill sets, capabilities, their knowledge. Maybe it's now multi-cloud, and getting a real good grasp around, very quickly being able to understand KPIs or some sort of information that allows you to figure out where the superstars in your org are from a embracing technology in the cloud standpoint, and those teams that may be lagging behind. And then once you identify that, it's okay. Now that I've identified some teams that are maybe struggling a little bit to fully embrace the cloud, then it becomes, well, why is that? Maybe you have a poor team, that was just inadvertently handcuffed with the monolithic legacy apps that nobody wants to touch, right? So judging that group, the same as the group that's been tasked with doing the new cool stuff with AI or any of that stuff, the cloud native serverless, all of those things, can be an unfair comparison because you don't have the context as to the why. I think, FinOps, you get a chance to provide context to things that you may not have been able to do before.
So try this on. I look at it as a framework by which we can change the way that we approach the analysis of the performance of IT by adding back in finance. So the current world of IT has spent a lot of time on building governance and documentation. but it kind of separates that financial element in that governance process. That governance process really becomes about how much can you get done with what you have, the time frame. It removes agile. It does all those things that I think this framework, utilizing FinOps, allows you to add both the human factor in as an evaluation, as well as the price and performance factors as an evaluation, which allows you then to really add back the whole picture of why are we doing this? How much did we pay? How much are we going to pay in the future? Is there a way to reduce what we pay? So as we make all these modernization decisions, we can use that governance structure, but add value to it with the FinOps side that actually adds a more agile approach back into it. So evaluating human performance is part of that. And I'm not saying the value of a person, I'm saying the value of their work, how much they're getting done, where they're getting it done. Can it be improved upon? So instead of it being about worker A is slow or worker B doesn't know what they're talking about, we're looking at the impact of those decisions and how they're performing on the cost of doing business at large. Add all that together, that framework changes the paradigm we currently approach IT with, and it actually makes it more humanistic, more approaching the human and their ability, as well as keeping up with the technological change with a financial acumen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? That's one of the things that I love about this entire space is there is so much of a people component to it as well as the data, and the financial side of the equation. It sort of creates a more holistic view of things.
Absolutely.
And I think as I think about individuals who are coming into the space for the first time and just giving them some guidance and advice is just really embrace the opportunity that is in front of you, because if you are courageous enough, I would say, you have the ability to have a voice in strategic business decisions that you may not realize you were ever going to get, or maybe it's not strictly defined in your job description, but just by the nature of what you can bring to the table. I'll give you an example of a sort of a business case, right? We were engaging with a large enterprise at one point in time, and somebody who was responsible for the cloud budget, so relatively high up inside the organization, and they were lamenting about how they were doing a really good job optimizing, et cetera, but when they got to the C-suite, all they saw was the fact that their cloud costs kept going up. And they were like, I'm just getting hammered. I need a way to tell a better story about what we're doing. So as an offshoot, we created a way to effectively break out technology spend by deployment timeframe, right? So the goal would be able to say, hey, yeah, the legacy applications that have been around for 10 years or whatever, if you look at those on a cost metric sample, they're actually going down. They're being optimized. They're not runaway costs. Your net new costs are coming from new applications, maybe better DR, all of these things. So it's taking the same dollars that you might be thinking about and putting it in a context that tells the story of the individuals internally in an organization to be successful. And if you're a FinOps team member and you can do that for maybe your boss who's 3 levels above you or 4, right? You're getting that exposure, and you can sort of see the value of what it is you're bringing to the table in the organization. Those are challenges that are super fun when you get the opportunity, but you also got to be listening for them and not be afraid, because as a practitioner, let's say you were in a meeting and that came up, you might have an idea, but the minute you hear perhaps where the question is coming from or what the challenge is, you may not be willing to say, hey, I can help with that, because you don't know. I would encourage people in the practitioner space to listen for those opportunities, to be creative, bring to the table and say, hey, this may not be exactly my purview, but I think I can help. And that's what you're seeing in FinOps.
I see a lot of the world of the IT CIO changing again. We're seeing this new role, which is the AI or Chief AI Officer, CAIO, come around. But what I also see is a lot of the CIOs are now moving back under that CFO structure. So they're still semi at the C-suite level, but they're really back into that service delivery phenomena that works for the CFO, because it's really about how much cost is going into that organization. And IT is a high-priced area. I can't tell you the number of times I've had to justify why does it cost so much to do something at all. And so again, having a framework for that CIO to use when interacting with the CFO community, the finance world, gives them a huge leg up in that I can play your game too. I can show you the relevance of cost. I can show you the relevance of technical decisions on time lag. Biggest killer in technology is the lag time by which you make the decision to move to a new technology and you actually are using it fully. Those things can be evaluated. You can show the impacts of that. It's been really interesting because when we first made our move at the university to cloud, the biggest question was, well, what's it going to cost us? And no one could figure it out because it all equates to 1 million parameters that none are controlled. It's all about usage. It's all about adaptability. It's all these things that now, again, with this framework, you've got something to use to help you explain that conversation. So either if you're at the start end of moving to the cloud, you should be thinking FinOps as part of that move to the cloud, because there's 3 things that need to be tied together much better in the community. And that's the IT work itself, but the whole relevance of the data and how you're going to use it, data management philosophy and governance tied with finance. And so those 3 pillars are what really should be strongly pushed in a modernization of IT arena. So it's the IT skills, it's the finance and FinOps ability, and it's really understanding the data utilization. All those other things fill into those pillars, and it gets to be a whole lot easier conversation.
I mean, you had me at data, really, is what it comes down to. Just, that's why this space is so much fun. And I think, if you're following along with FinOps.org, right, in the community and the Scopes project, right, it's what I was talking about before of FinOps practitioners get the ability to do so many cool things inside of an organization if they embrace it, that they're now being asked to do things beyond just your basic cloud, which makes it's kudos to them and the entire FinOps community that they have generated this sort of internal value where others in the organization are like, hey, I saw what they did for the cloud. That's super cool. Can you also do it for these other things?
Absolutely.
Right. So it opens up that avenue. It's such a natural place. And it really speaks to the value of the rigor that FinOps has brought to the cloud. Because to your point, what anybody in the C-suite wants more than anything else is data and information, right? To be able to defend, explain, get, the next dollar, whatever it is, explain what they're doing now to get that visibility. And the more you can have that data in your pocket and answer those questions, the easier those meetings become. And, I think you have a new role now that maybe you want to spend a minute talking about, because I think it's super exciting, and I think more of those things are going to be coming your way.
Yeah, the new role I have is working for Cal Poly and working with Cal Maritime and the Solano campus to kind of integrate activities and create initiatives very similar to what we've been doing at Cal Poly, which are transformational in nature, those that help the university grow, help opportunities for students, bring partnerships to the table, so that what we have is really a growing culture associated with both universities and the integration of those 2 universities. It's a really interesting mission set because it's based around the maritime community. And I tell everybody my uncle was a merchant marine ship captain. And so I know all about it from personal experience. I don't know every facet of it, but everything he would share. And so it's amazing the amount of technology that they use and the opportunity that it avails for growth in the university and opportunity around it. So I'm excited by that because kind of technology and opportunity tie hand in hand. And I think that we see a lot of data around maritime activities, shipping, all of those things are now big, intensive data elements. And so I'm excited by that. And I think I'll be using my FinOps experience in approaching a lot of that because, again, if it doesn't equate to a good deal, the big question for the C-suite, for everybody, what is a good deal? And so again, having that base of understanding around the FinOps approach to doing things, that really helps formulate what the good deal is.
Yeah, the deal word is key. I want to come back to that in a minute. Now, based on knowing the merchant marine side of the equation, right? I think you need more than just the airplane picture in the background. I think you need some sort of, maritime photo to tie it all together.
And that's exactly right. I'll have to put some kind of tanker underneath it.
There you go. So on the deal piece, right? That brings up another conversation that happens often at a higher level inside the organization. And that is really kind of understanding how to negotiate deals with your cloud providers, or as we go beyond the cloud, your SaaS companies, any of that sort of stuff. And it's really, I think, one of the more challenging conversations is the idea. And again, I love the C-suite, but oftentimes, they deal in black and white and absolutes to some extent, where somebody who's a rep for one of the cloud providers will come to them and say, hey, we can cut your costs by X amount, right? And oh, that sounds really good. We should do that. When in reality, there's so much more to it than that. And the cost to actually make the switch is way more than you're ever going to regain from doing it. Now, there are firm believer there's always the right time and the right reasons to either go from one cloud to multi-cloud or to switch cloud providers. There's a variety of different things that make sense, but it's never quite as simple as I think it comes across as, just the sheer amount of time and effort. For me, I always think about maximizing constrained resources. That's the challenge of every day, whether it's, the oxygen you get to breathe, maximizing that, the dollars in your bank account, whatever it is. And I think internal time for, people is often undervalued or not tracked or not understood. And using suboptimal solutions on that front creates, honestly, a net loss at the end of the day, even though your cloud bill may have gone down by $100,000 a year. Yay, good on you. But you spent $800,000 to get that.
Yeah. So again, to me, anytime you start a new operation, a new enterprise, the whole area of merger and acquisitions, FinOps should be involved in all of that. To me, if you're buying a company and you don't know what their technological base is and how much it's going to cost you to convert it to whatever you're doing, I've seen it time after time after time where the assessment was made, they're up to speed. What is up to speed? And I think FinOps is a huge potential for that merger, that new start, that merging two entities of any kind together to really evaluate where are both portfolios? What is it going to cost us to get to the same level? And is this the opportunity to have one dominant over the other? Or do we just scrap it all? And these are all really financial. In the end, it's financial decisions, but it's got to be based off a combination of the financial and the technology understanding. And if you only talk to the individuals in each of those silos, they will tell you they're the best ever. But they may not be what the new primary owner wants. It may not be what the entity really desires as an end state. And so again, this is a wonderful opportunity for a FinOps-based organization to really have that neutral stance to reevaluate where they're at and where they're going with both entities.
Yeah, it's honestly one of my favorite AI conversations in this space. Is I think AI is disruptive in a lot of places. One of the places that I think people miss is inside of the CSP landscape, right? I think it's causing more and more conversations around, I have the right provider for this strategy, right? It's not the, hey, I've got a provider who does everything from, A to Z. This is a very specific business strategy, disruptive technology. And the conversations there, I think, go beyond the, of course, I'm with cloud provider A, I'm just going to spin up some more stuff. They launch some new services. This is really, I think, rethinking commitment to individual CSPs. It's really focused, in my mind, multi-cloud should have always been based on technologies, not necessarily costs. The people that know me know my finance and my CPA background from a long time ago probably think I'm crazy. But, it really is about what's the right technology in the cloud, because these are business strategy, long-term decisions. And you're right, as a FinOps person, if you don't understand where the business is going in general, you could miss an opportunity or, provide the wrong information back. So the more you can understand what the actual strategies for the entire organization are, should inform you, to your point, as you go down the technology route.
Right. Absolutely. And I think the interesting part of this goes back to that human factor. What skill sets do you currently have in the organization? And so again, this is really trying to force to the table more than just the technical response to a problem. It's adding that extra element of, okay, wait a minute, we have 10 network engineers, but they're old school network engineers. They're not cloud network engineers. What does it take to transfer them? Will they stay on the job or will they go look elsewhere? These are all decisions that impact significantly the bottom line of that transition to the cloud. Having that form by which the C-suite knows that these are additional questions they would not think of. Somebody says to them, hey, have you thought about this? I see that as part of that role of that FinOps community member that says, hey, have you thought about these additional data points? It's not all up to the technical side. It's not all up to the HR side. It's a combined environment. It's a working group where you've got somebody who is saying from that financial perspective, not this is how much you spent last year, but this is what you may have to address financially if you make these kinds of changes.
Yeah, and I think you could start with AI in that conversation, but I think you can even go back a couple of steps and just think about containerization.
Absolutely.
It's such a different skill set than what a lot of people have. And it's still wrapping your arms around, okay, how do I get comfortable with that? Because that actually frees up, in my mind, one of the false narratives, I think, in cloud a little bit is really about the ability to be nimble and be quick and architect for change, right? If there's anything that is just screams architect for change and be nimble, it's like the containerization technology, right? Just makes it more portable. All those different things can, so it's that exact conversation. You may have individuals in your organization who are fantastic at technology from 3 years ago, but what are they capable of doing now as you're moving forward in the space? And AI just like stepped on the gas pedal there.
Yeah. I think
that's an easy one to start with, but I still think there's more on the container.
I think so too. I think the other part that's interesting here is this. Now there's also yet an even more important question. Do I insource it or do I outsource it? Do I draw from, is this a one and done deployment? Is this something I can get done by utilizing some containerized process? Takes me 30 days. I'm done. I don't have to ever work with it again. I now hand it to a user and say, here, go crazy. All these decisions, is that left solely to the technician who, oh, by the way, might be putting themselves out of a job when they make that decision. And so again, it's almost as if you have to create a neutral think place for those kinds of support decisions to be made, which the FinOps can help you with decision-wise. And again, I think that applies to the senior C-suite when they're looking at, are we transitioning employees? Are we working, to keep them? What are we doing? What's our strategy? Where are we going with all these things? And, I don't know many organizations who have an endless technology pot of money. As such, you have to be constantly evaluating tech versus human, right? It's a horrible situation, but that's the world that we live in. And sometimes it's not get rid of the human or move them to another. It's really reskill them.
Yeah,
and what's the cost of reskilling?
Yeah, because I agree, because I see that conversation often, and I've sort of been on the other side of the argument with executives before around, not understanding the cost to rehire people or hire the next person, not only cost in dollars and increase in salary, the disruption, the training time, the hit to, negative morale, however you want to weigh it, right? Those hidden costs oftentimes get missed in the equation.
I think this is where I want to go back to a point you were making very early on. This is where this is a force multiplier for that CIO, that decision maker in the technology, CTO type side. where they have to take the information, but they have to be able to translate it out of the tech, out of the finance world. I'll give you a silly example, but when we first started to go to cloud, we were evaluating all sorts of options. And the basic question I got back was not why these options, but why do we need to do it at all? And so basically what we did is we put together a campaign. The campaign was focused around the fact that we were in a data center that was literally falling apart. We had a restroom above us, above the data center, and that restroom would periodically overflow and flood out banks of computers underneath it. And so I went to the university using great technical data, and I said, hey, this is a level 4. I made up a level 4. It's really only 3 levels of risk, but this is a level 4. Imminent loss of data, non-recoverable, all these sorts of things. And they looked at me and they go, I don't get it. How come? And so we went back and, we went, it's a complete failure. I failed to deliver the message correctly. And so we made up a campaign, and the campaign was, we're one flush away from losing all of our data at Cal Poly. Or not, that campaign worked. It got their attention. It was a visual delivery of critical information. So it's really about taking all this great stuff FinOps is producing and creating that visual image out of it that says, yeah, it's a pretty dire situation. And if we don't do something, we're going to pay a whole lot more than we thought we had to in the first.
Yeah, no, I love that campaign. That's fantastic. And you used one of my favorite phrases, which is force multiplier. I pair that with force extension an awful lot, right? As you think about what it is that, you can bring to the table. And I think one of the things that I love about sort of working at Vega and being able to build and design these solutions is being able to participate in tons and tons and tons of people's success along the way and be listening and to help them bring some of that to the table, being nimble enough on our side to do some of the heavy lifting on the data or understanding what is really being asked and saying, hey, I think we can help you do that. Let's, collaborate together and then we'll put it in the platform for you, which is super fun.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned, and this is what I was so excited about when we started to enroll the FinOps into the culture we were creating, is that being in IT is a lonely, not very thankful job, right? Everything breaks, it's your fault. When it's working, nobody notices. It's good, it didn't break. So what we saw was the addition, the rolling finance back in to be your part, creates two communities who have a very similar problem set. When there's plenty of money, finance is doing great. When there's not enough, everybody really dislikes the finance people. And so if you can create a culture where you're sympathetic, you're cooperative, you are actually working to answer problems and solve them before they occur or as they occur, and you have a solution that's cost effective and can be paid for with what you have, that seems to make everything flow so much better. And so really creating a positive environment as a result.
Yeah, I two examples there that I 100% agree with. One is I come from a managed service background. And when we would engage with customers during their, their QBRs or whatnot, right, it was always hey, here's your patching stats. And that's an example of the only time people care about patching stats is when they're not good. If they're good, you're like, oh, good, you're doing what I paid you to do. Awesome. But then we would come to the table in the same meeting and talk about the FinOps, and they would, lean forward. They would get super excited. And the other teams internal at the managed service provider would be like, why do they always want to hear you guys talk? I'm like, because you're hitting a 98-mile-an-hour curveball. I'm hitting the biggest, fattest softball, at 40 miles an hour you've ever seen. This is great. And also, I coached a ton of youth sports when my kids were growing up. And I always felt bad for two particular sets of parents. The parents of a goalie, because nobody cares when a goalkeeper does their job, but heaven forbid that they, one goes by, doesn't matter how good of a shot it was, like, your kid sucks. Or, if you're a relief pitcher in baseball or softball, right? That's, it's thankless because if you do your job, they're like, well, you were supposed to, but your failures just get exacerbated. So it is like being in IT, right? If something breaks, it's your fault.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been really fun. There are antibodies to FinOps. There are those who don't believe that, hey, I'm technical and I make the best decision and my decision shouldn't be questioned. And so there is a growth pattern that needs to occur. But I think what they really, if you're the management side, the leadership side, really should embrace it. Because again, if you do it right, you are predicting the problem and solving it before it happens. You are being anticipatory. The best businesses, those who are making the most money, are those who are predicting customer needs and delivering fastest to the market. Well, that's kind of what FinOps does for IT. It allows you to better predict customer needs and deliver solutions to them faster as needed at a cost and price point that you can afford to exist with. Nobody should question that, because that's really your bottom line is how is the customer related to my decisions? Are they happy with what we're doing or not? If FinOps is enabling you to do that, you should be embracing it like crazy to help you achieve those goals. And so I think there's a huge relevance between FinOps, customer success, and all these different metrics that IT has put in place to try to evaluate their lifestyle, what they do for a living. This is the one that puts you over the top. If you truly embrace it, bring it to the table, make it part of how you do business as part of your framework, you can play the game of finance as well as anybody. You can be equivalent to all those others who are saying, woe is me, but I figured a way out of it anyway.
Yeah, I agree. So I think about, what makes FinOps teams successful. And one of the things that I've always argued is that you need a definitive charter. Needs a strong word. It's better if you have a charter from some level up in the organization. Now, the challenge is there's two ways to do that charter. There is one that effectively turns your FinOps team into being painted with the internal audit brush. Bad juju, doesn't get what you want. And there's one, right, that allows them to be a true business partner with the teams internally, which will drive their success, and you'll get what you want. Same thing. Hey, I need a charter, but there's a good way and a bad way to deliver said charter.
I think where they work, where they're embedded, there's so many decision points on how to effectively deploy FinOps into an organization. A lot of it is culturally based. Also, what kind of culture do they have? Is the finance department seen as the bad guy on most things? Again, so it really matters where and how you fit them. The key would be understanding what it can do for you and really deploying it into your organizational structure. Again, the interesting part of how things go in the world of technology, budgets are up, budgets are down. If you're doing this right, you're able to adjust accordingly. If FinOps isn't part of that critical structure, that architecture you use, you're just starting over every time you have one of those up or down. And you're starting over with bad data, and you're scrambling to get to the solution.
Yeah. And I think if you go back to the conversation or the point I made about my CEO that said cost doesn't matter, and my reply was until it does, right? You want to avoid those things, right? Exactly what you said, if you get in front of them, if you understand what's there and you've designed and orchestrated sort of your technology solution the right way, it is easier to adapt to the ups and downs because you're not beholden to things that are monolithic and unchangeable, right? That's what I've always loved about the cloud. Honestly, if I go back to way back in my education, early on, learning about just-in-time manufacturing, right? The concept of, hey, I'm only going to get what I need right when I need it. I've always thought about cloud as the same way, right? It's like, hey, I need CPU, I need memory, I need resources. I want it when I need it. And when I don't need it, I don't want to pay for it, right? Very simplistic view, but, I think those are the things that are so attractive about sort of the cloud space.
I think it's also very important to have it in that whole modernization research side. Understanding the financial decisions associated with change is critical, or you make the same mistake you do every time when you do change, which is we're just going to make the change and we'll figure it all out later. Later is too late. You've either overpaid, undercosted, or worst of all, you've got too many people with not the knowledge level that they need to execute their roles. So again, those decision points in the upfront section are critical in understanding where you go in the future. I would suggest no one ever does another new start cloud deployment without having a strong FinOps approach to doing it.
I could not agree more, because I would also add that people have a very short memory. So when you're like, hey, we're going to do this thing, and we're going to do it because we need to do it based on speed. And yeah, we don't necessarily have the time to think about all these things. We'll go do that later. Well, when you get to the later, people conveniently forget that that was the agreement from the very beginning. They're like, well, why are we talking about this? Because we all knew we were going to have to talk about it because the choice we made back here.
Yeah, you said it earlier. The unfortunate part is that many times there's such a separation between the tech side and the finance side that they assume that now that we've moved to this cloud thing, we're going to be reducing costs. And in fact, cloud always goes up because demand always goes up. The more people see how much you can get done, the more they want done. It's back to that whole creating data. The more data I find I have, the more I want to have access to it. The more I have access to it, the more I want to have analysis on it. The more that I have analysis, I want to do reports. So it's like this ever evolving data cloud of I wants. It all costs. None of that is free. And so again, having the ability to look at the transitional costs, where am I saving? What am I not doing the same as I did before is the only way you can pay for those increased utilization factors.
Yeah, you're right. It's the concept of increasing the business value of the cloud. So much of what people focus on is the cost of the cloud. Well, the whole point is I need my cost to drive business value, which is revenue, which is speed to market, which is customers, which is all of those things. And that's all data that needs to be included, because otherwise you're just operating in a weird little silo that is, this is my cost. Well, okay, well, I got another dollar to spend. Where should I spend it? Which dollar is going to drive the most revenue? Or which dollar, if I'm spending it on security, is going to allow me to avoid a much larger future cost? No revenue tied to it, but it's significant business impacting cost avoidance or, reputation avoidance. All of those sort of things go in there. And that's in my mind where hopefully the FinOps practice, beyond just the scopes project and getting to non-cloud things, but just really pulling in the business value pieces that I think gets missed. And that's the exciting part.
Yeah, interesting. If you've ever done profit and loss for a living, you can't live without your finance person. Your finance person is locked at the hip with you. When I was running a small business, my finance person and I met 4, 5, 6, 7, 12 times a day. It was insane the amount of time we spent together because of the importance of understanding all of those decision points: income, revenue, outgo, overhead, brick and mortar costs, pencils and paper costs. Everything is a value cost. In my mind, I was already adapting to a FinOps experience with that experience. And now in that CIO role, I've tried to add that in, and it, in parallel, this wonderful thing called FinOps stood up. So I just naturally flowed into it because I felt that connectivity already. I think the fact that it's formalizing, it's really becoming something of value and size, weight, shape is really important for those in the world of IT to draw on and really get engaged in, so that they too can have that connectivity to the financial equation side, understanding what your decisions are costing and why, and what is the impact cost value wise. I'll tell you, one of the strangest things when we started this is the cost value equation that they used did things like, well, how much power are you using? Nobody looks at that. That's not a value for cost savings, right? So really, it's about performance. It's about what are you supplying to your customer base? How happy are they in what you're providing? So, this is the greatest game that you can play to be a winner in the technology field, is to have that cost value factor involved in everything you show.
Yeah, no, I can't tell you how much I've appreciated this conversation with you today. It has been enlightening. You are super engaging. You're passionate about, what it is that you bring to the table. And I got to tell you, if you'd be up for it, I'd love to check back in and do another one of these in 6 months as you're progressing in your new role, just to understand, hey, what were the unexpected challenges you hit? What did you learn? How you feeling about, the entire space now? Because time moves very fast. I can't imagine what it's going to be like in 6 months from now, but should be fun.
Should be a ball of fire.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. As long as that ball of fire in the sky warms up the temperatures here a little bit, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
well, we'll get there. You know, living in California is not a bad.
No, I would, especially now. Yes, I would agree. Well, again, I appreciated your time today. It was just so enlightening.
Thanks, Will. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed the opportunity and really loved the opportunity to talk about what FinOps really has done kind of for us and the potential for the future. I really look forward to see what happens next.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.